March 1944, 2:17 p.m. A rain-soaked airfield somewhere in eastern England. A lone P-47 Thunderbolt rumbles down the runway with something it was never designed to carry. Beneath its massive fuselage hangs a single 500-pound bomb. Pilots stop talking. Ground crews stop working. Even the officers watching from the edge of the runway expect the same outcome. A snapped mounting bracket, a violent stall, a fiery crash before the aircraft ever clears the trees. Because every engineer who helped build the Thunderbolt insists on the same thing. This cannot fly. The fighter is already one of the heaviest single-engine aircraft in the world. Its enormous radial engine drinks fuel by the gallon. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns make it deadly in the skies, and every pound of its design is calculated for air combat, not bombing missions. Add another 500 pounds underneath the fuselage. They warn, and the center of gravity shifts. Control disappears. Recovery from a dive becomes impossible. The pilot dies. Yet the aircraft keeps accelerating. Its wheels leave the runway. The Thunderbolt climbs. Steady, level, almost effortlessly. The impossible is happening in full view of everyone on the ground. Somewhere below, a young mechanic watches with grease still staining his hands. He isn't an engineer. He isn't a test pilot. He's never attended an aircraft design meeting. He simply spends every day repairing airplanes that return riddled with German bullets, and too many that never return at all. He's watched Allied bombers burn over occupied Europe. He's watched crews climb into aircraft knowing flak batteries are waiting, and he reaches one dangerous conclusion. Maybe the experts aren't wrong because they're incompetent. Maybe they're wrong because they've never had to survive the battlefield. So while manuals say don't, this mechanic asks a different question. Why not, armed with little more than salvaged metal basic tools and experience earned on muddy flight lines, he begins altering one of America's most powerful fighters in complete defiance of official doctrine. No approval, no engineering drawings, no guarantees. If he succeeds, the Thunderbolt could become something no one believes possible, a fighter capable of escorting bombers to the target, destroying that target itself, and then battling enemy fighters on the journey home. If he fails, he'll destroy a priceless combat aircraft and probably kill the pilot brave enough to test it. Within months, the results of that gamble will echo across the battlefields of Europe. Columns of German armor will disappear beneath precision strikes. Rail yards will erupt in flames. Supply lines will collapse. And one of the greatest fighter aircraft of the Second World War will earn an entirely new reputation. But none of that begins in a factory. It begins with one mechanic and one modification everyone else calls impossible. The story begins months before anyone dares to hang a bomb beneath a P-47. By early 1944, the Allied air campaign over Europe reaches a turning point. Every day, formations of heavy bombers cross the English Channel, striking rail yards, bridges, factories, and fuel depots deep inside occupied territory. They inflict enormous damage, but they pay a terrible price. German anti-aircraft guns fill the skies with black bursts of flak. Fighter escorts can protect bombers from enemy aircraft, but once the bombs fall, the bombers remain slow, predictable targets. Mission after mission, experienced crews disappear into columns of smoke over France, Belgium, and Germany. Ground crews witness the cost before anyone else. They count the empty parking spaces on the flight line. They patch bullet holes in aircraft that somehow return, and they help unload crews who never fly again. Among those mechanics is Staff Sergeant Charles Johnson, a 23-year-old enlisted man whose job is to keep America's largest fighter aircraft flying. The P-47 Thunderbolt already earns a reputation unlike any other fighter in the war. Powered by a massive Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine, producing nearly 2,000 horsepower, the Thunderbolt is enormous. It outweighs many aircraft that technically belong in completely different categories. Pilots joke that it flies like a locomotive with wings. German pilots call it almost impossible to shoot down. Its thick radial engine absorbs punishment that destroys lighter fighters, while 8.50 caliber machine guns transform every attack into a storm of steel. The aircraft excels as a bomber escort, but Johnson believes it can do much more. Every evening, after returning aircraft are secured, he walks along the flight line studying the Thunderbolt structure. He notices something engineers hundreds of miles away never experience. The aircraft routinely lands carrying hundreds of gallons of unused fuel. That fuel weighs thousands of pounds. If the airframe safely supports that weight every day, why couldn't it carry additional weight somewhere else? The question refuses to leave his mind. Military manuals insist the answer is simple. Because fighters are not bombers. Aircraft designers calculate balance with extraordinary precision, move the center of gravity too far in any direction, and an airplane becomes unstable. During combat, instability means death. Official engineering guidance discourages major external bomb loads beneath the Thunderbolt's fuselage. The risks appear obvious. Additional drag, reduced performance, dangerous handling during dive recoveries. No commander wants to lose aircraft because someone experiments with unauthorized modifications. Yet Johnson continues thinking. Experience teaches him something textbooks cannot. Real combat rarely follows engineering theory. He has watched damaged Thunderbolts return missing sections of wing, riddled with cannon holes, even trailing oil across the runway. Somehow they keep flying. That kind of strength suggests hidden possibilities. One rainy evening, after another costly bombing mission, Johnson gathers two fellow mechanics inside a dim maintenance hangar. Spread across a workbench lie damaged bomb shackles, salvaged from aircraft beyond repair, bent steel brackets, discarded mounting hardware, scraps everyone else considers useless. Johnson sees opportunity. His idea sounds almost reckless. Instead of redesigning the aircraft, why not adapt existing bomb release equipment to fit the Thunderbolt? No complicated engineering program, no factory support, only practical field improvisation. His friends stare silently. If they're caught drilling holes into operational fighters without authorization, their military careers could end immediately. But every one of them has watched bombers explode over Europe. Doing nothing seems equally dangerous. Night after night, after regular maintenance ends, they return to the hangar. Sparks from welding torches illuminate concrete walls. Metal echoes beneath hammer blows. Measurements are checked again and again. Every bracket must distribute weight across the strongest structural sections of the aircraft. Every bolt must survive violent maneuvering at hundreds of miles per hour. Failure isn't an option. A loose bomb could tear itself free during flight. The aircraft and its pilot would have almost no chance. After days of work, the prototype is finished. Suspended beneath the Thunderbolt rests a single 500-pound bomb. The installation looks surprisingly natural, almost as though the airplane should have carried it all along. Johnson signs a maintenance paperwork and quietly leaves it where his commanding officer will find it before dawn. He expects anger, perhaps arrest. Instead, curiosity wins. The squadron commander walks around the modified fighter in complete silence. He inspects every weld, every mounting bracket, every release mechanism. Nothing appears careless. Nothing appears rushed. Finally, he looks toward Johnson. Only one question matters. Are you certain it'll fly? Johnson doesn't pretend to know. No simulator exists. No engineering report supports him. No test pilot has ever attempted exactly this configuration. His answer is simple. There's only one way to find out, sir. The words hang in the cold morning air. Within hours, a pilot will climb into an aircraft that military experts believe should never leave the ground. If Johnson's calculations are wrong, everyone watching will witness disaster. But if they're right, the role of the P-47 Thunderbolt may change forever. The first successful test changes more than a single airplane. It changes minds. Within days, mechanics from neighboring squadrons arrive to inspect the modified Thunderbolt. They crawl beneath the fuselage with notebooks in hand, measuring brackets, studying mounting points, and asking the same question: how did you make it work? Charles Johnson never claims to be a genius. He simply explains what he has learned from years of repairing combat aircraft. The Thunderbolt is stronger than anyone gives it credit for. Its massive radial engine produces enough power to overcome the added weight, while its rugged airframe absorbs punishment that would destroy lighter fighters. The key isn't forcing the airplane to do something impossible. It's understanding what it was capable of all along. Soon, more P-47s begin flying with external bombs. Pilots approach the first combat missions cautiously. Takeoffs require longer runway rolls. Climbs are slower. The aircraft feels heavier on the controls. But once the bombs are released, the Thunderbolt transforms back into the powerful fighter every pilot knows. For the first time, escort fighters no longer have to watch bombers attack alone. Now they can strike enemy targets themselves. Bridges, railway junctions, supply depots, convoys moving toward the front. Every successful mission builds confidence. Every pilot returning safely weakens the argument that the modification is too dangerous. The greatest test comes as Allied planners prepare for the invasion of Western Europe. The coming operation demands relentless attacks against German transportation networks. Every bridge destroyed delays reinforcements. Every ammunition dump eliminated saves Allied lives before troops even reach the beaches. The Thunderbolt suddenly becomes the ideal weapon. Flying at low altitude, it dives toward targets with remarkable speed. Pilots release their bombs only seconds before pulling out of steep attacks. Moments later, they are climbing back into the sky, ready to defend themselves against German fighters. Medium bombers cannot do that. The P-47 can. Ground crews refuse to stop improving the design. Additional mounting points appear beneath the wings. Stronger brackets allow larger bomb loads. Soon, rockets join the aircraft's growing arsenal. What begins as one unauthorized field modification evolves into an entirely new way of fighting the air war. Even skeptical officers begin changing their opinions. Mission reports arrive almost daily. Rail lines destroyed. Fuel convoys burning. Enemy gun positions silenced. German armored columns scattered before reaching the battlefield. Pilots praise the aircraft's ability to survive intense anti-aircraft fire. Its thick armor and air-cooled engine allow many Thunderbolts to limp home despite severe damage. The aircraft earns a new reputation among Allied soldiers. Whenever they hear the deep roar of its engine overhead, they know help has arrived. German troops learn the same lesson. The unmistakable sound of a diving Thunderbolt becomes a warning that explosions are only seconds away. Eventually, aviation engineers visit frontline units to evaluate what mechanics have accomplished. Instead of finding reckless improvisation, they discover carefully reinforced mounting systems, practical solutions, and hundreds of successful combat sorties, proving the concept works. The battlefield has answered questions that engineering calculations alone never could. Before long, factory-built Thunderbolts begin leaving production lines equipped with standardized bomb racks. What once exists as an unauthorized experiment becomes official equipment. The transformation is complete. The P-47 is no longer simply an escort fighter. It has become one of the most effective fighter bombers of the Second World War. By the final months of the conflict, Thunderbolts attack everything from tanks and artillery positions to railroads and fortified defenses. Their versatility allows commanders to assign them almost any mission. Escort bombers in the morning, destroy bridges in the afternoon, strafe enemy convoys before sunset. Few aircraft prove so adaptable under combat conditions. For Charles Johnson, however, the achievement is never about recognition. He returns to maintenance line after each mission exactly as before, covered in grease, tightening bolts, inspecting engines, and preparing another Thunderbolt for tomorrow's battle. While others celebrate successful operations, he focuses on the next airplane waiting for repair, because he understands something few people ever do. Victory is not always won by the people sitting in the cockpit. Sometimes it begins with the mechanic holding a wrench. Sometimes history changes long before the engine starts. And sometimes the most important innovation of the war doesn't come from a factory or a boardroom. It comes from a muddy airfield where one determined mechanic refuses to believe that impossible is the final answer. When the war in Europe finally ends in May 1945, the P-47 Thunderbolt has become far more than the fighter its designers originally envisioned. It has escorted bombers across occupied Europe, destroyed bridges and railways, shattered armored columns, and provided life-saving close air support to Allied soldiers advancing across the continent. The aircraft's remarkable versatility becomes one of the defining success stories of Allied tactical air power. Many factors contribute to that transformation. Pilots, engineers, commanders, and thousands of ground crew members working together under extraordinary pressure. Among those countless contributions are the practical innovations developed by mechanics in the field, who often solve problems with experience, ingenuity, and determination long before official manuals caught up. Charles Johnson eventually returns home after the war, leaving behind the muddy airfields and constant roar combat engines. Like so many veterans of the greatest generation, he carries his experiences quietly. The headlines celebrate famous aces and victorious generals, while countless mechanics who kept those victories possible fade into history. Yet every restored Thunderbolt displayed in museums today tells a deeper story, not just of horsepower or machine guns, but of human imagination, because every great machine still depends on the people willing to improve it. The story of the Thunderbolt reminds us that innovation is rarely born from comfort. It emerges under pressure, when lives depend on finding answers no textbook can provide. Sometimes those answers come from engineers with blueprints. Sometimes they come from mechanics with grease on their hands and a wrench in their pocket. History often remembers the aircraft. It remembers the battles. It remembers the victories. But behind every legendary machine stands someone who refuses to accept that impossible is the final word. And sometimes the course of history changes not because someone builds a better airplane, but because one determined mechanic dares to believe the airplane can be better.